Welcome to the Manistee Local Podcast, and welcome back to our loyal subscribers, and a warm welcome to all of our new listeners. This podcast is brought to you by our amazing sponsors who make it possible to bring us high-quality content each and every week. We want to extend a big thank you to them for their continued support, and if you enjoy this podcast, please show your appreciation by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your feedback means everything to us and helps us continue to improve. Also, real quick, I want to take another moment to mention how our sponsors contribute to the quality of our production. Their support allows us to invest in better equipment, top-notch guests, and research, which in turn leads to even more engaging and informative episodes. So once again, thank you to our sponsors, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoy the show. Cheers. You know, he's going to school for video edit, design, computer, tech stuff.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, "Can you take the audio from here and put it in this?" And he was like, "Yeah, no problem."
See?
So, you know.
I'd be lost trying to do that stuff. I remember we had a guy, Tyler Hollingsworth, that used to work for us, and he was the tech guy, right? Anything you needed, you took it to him. And so when he went to down to Midland PD, and we lost him, and it was a huge loss for us, because just having somebody that go, "Hey, I need you to do this," was really nice to have.
How come you went to Midland?
Well, he had some family down that way, so he went home. You know, we've lost a lot of people from the sheriff's office over the years, and everybody has their own reasons, and you know what I tell people is, you know, I'd never fault somebody for leaving if it's what's best for them and their family. Things are different in law enforcement these days.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be you got a job. You know, when I started, I was interviewing with 100 other candidates for one spot.
You know, when I had Chief Glass on here, he said the very same thing.
Yeah.
When he got into it, there was too many people trying to be police officers.
Just a handful of openings, and I started my career part-time, you know, and that's what you had to do. You had to put in some time and get some experience, and you know, now you go on the MCL's website, which is our licensing organization, and you see how many openings there are. They're everywhere. So really try hard to get people who are from this area, right, who you know, appreciate the fact that maybe you're not down 30 calls when you start your shift, and you're not running call to call the entire time. You get some time to do some proactive stuff. You get some time to, you know, if your kid's playing t-ball and you're working that day, I've always told my staff, like, "Hey, if you're working and we don't have any calls holding, nobody's waiting for service, pop into your kid's t-ball game, you know, check that out for a little bit." So that's something.
This episode is brought to you by Watson Motors. Are you in the market for a new vehicle? Watson Motors is honored to have been voted Manistee News Advocate's Reader's Choice for Top Automotive Service Department and New Car Dealer. The Watson Motors team would like to take this moment to thank the community for your trust, loyalty, and support. As a locally family-owned and operated business, Watson Motors is dedicated to continuing to provide top-quality vehicles and exceptional service to the community that deserves nothing less. Whether you're in the market for a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, or used vehicle, or need maintenance on your current ride, Watson Motors has you covered. Visit www.watson-motors.com today to see the largest new and used car inventory in town. This episode is brought to you by Brandon Ball, broker-owner of Dwelling Realty in Manistee, Michigan. Listen, are you looking to sell your home? Then look no further. When you list with Brandon Ball, you'll get a trusted advisor who will guide you through the entire selling process. With extensive knowledge of the local market, he'll help you price your home competitively to attract the right buyers. And with proven market strategies, your home will be seen by the most qualified buyers. With his 17 years in the business, you'll have someone who's experienced and on your side. Contact Brandon today to get started selling your home. 231-690-4981 or Brandon@dwellingrealty.com. This episode is brought to you by Just Clean, Manistee's premier car wash located at 146 Cleveland Street or just north of the US 31 bridge. Look, if you're anything like me, you're not going to spend an hour or two in the hot summer sun in your driveway trying to wash your vehicle. I don't have time for that. So I always take my truck to Just Clean. I choose their ultimate car wash, which includes a triple foam conditioner, a ceramic coating plus wax, and a 60-second heated blow dry. They are the only car wash in town offering the ceramic coating. For my money, I choose Just Clean, and I hope you do too.
Something we can offer people, but it's almost kind of like mercenary law enforcement now. You know, people come, they work a couple of years, and they're like, hey, I'm going to go down to Ottawa. They're paying more money down there. And then
Yeah, so that's why I said, why did he leave? Because my assumption was quick. My opinion in my mind was it's probably because of funding, probably because of money.
Yep. And you see that a lot more now, you know, and retirements, they started, you know, moving away from like the defined benefit, the traditional pension type retirements, and they went to, you know, defined contributions or just like 401ks. And so some of those departments that still have, like our city PD, that still have that traditional pension, those are hard to find these days. So we lose them for a multitude of reasons.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've known each other for a long time. And I think from a very young age, I could tell right away that you were definitely, I thought for sure military for you at first. You know, for those that are listening, or we met, I was friends with your brother.
Yep.
And you were pretty young. I mean, what's your age now?
I'm 38 now.
So yeah, I'm 45, and so there's a pretty big, a decent sized age gap there. In any event, you were young when I met you. You were, you know, we were kids. I mean, I was probably 17, and I thought, man, because your dad, fireman, right? Volunteer fireman. I mean, it looked to me like you were definitely kind of following in his footsteps. He was definitely, he is somebody that you definitely, I would assume that you look up to.
Yeah, both my parents were phenomenal, and watching Dad, and I talk about this all the time, you know, but both my parents, the values that they instilled in our, you know, their kids, is something that I've appreciated, and I talk about all the time. But watching Dad, you know, we were pretty comfortable in our lives. We had, you know, we had what we needed, but to watch him drop everything to go help people in the community who needed help time and time again, that was something that impacted me, and it goes right to what you're saying. That's kind of where I am, why I am where I am today, because of watching him do that all those years. So,
at what point did you say, I want to be a police officer?
Yeah, so I knew really young what I wanted to do, and that was be a pilot. And then I realized I wasn't very good at math, so I remember being in Mrs. Moore's advanced algebra class, and I dropped it. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I decided I want to be a police officer. She said, my husband's a state trooper, he uses math every single day. And, you know, I did use math, but it was subtraction for my ending mileage, and I used a calculator, and that was it. But no, it was, you know, right out of high school, I went into the track program at West Shore, and I knew then, you know, even my senior year of high school, what I wanted to do. And, you know, we're blessed to have a really cool college right just to the south of us here that has that program.
Yeah, it's a good program.
You know, I was able to stay in the area, and, you know, started out working part-time down in Oceana County for Hart and Rothbury PD, and then I got hired by the tribe up here, where I worked about 10 months before I started with the county, and I'm just thankful that Dale Gutowski gave me an opportunity, and, you know, it's the rest is what it is. So.
Well, you had pivoted at one point from being a sheriff deputy. You took on a different role. Did you not? I thought you took on a different. You went a different route. You came out of.
No, I've always been.
What's been your evolution up to sheriff, I guess? Yeah,
so I started with the sheriff's office February 19th of 07. Got promoted in 14 to sergeant, road patrol sergeant. Before that, I had done a couple years in the drug team. You know, got to do 5 years in our emergency response team. Been on the dive team the majority of my career. So then from sergeant, I was promoted to road patrol lieutenant, which is also, at that time, was a shared position as emergency management coordinator. So
maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think
that's what I'm thinking of.
That's probably what it is. You know, that role traditionally has always been housed within the sheriff's office ranks. And it made sense. It's since moved over to the dispatch center because they have more of an overarching emergency services coverage, so it makes more sense there. But what a great experience that was, just you know, running incident command and getting to know some of the logistics side of emergency response, and it gave me a lot of great opportunities, including being able to teach the active shooter training that I teach throughout the county, which has been great for me. So, and then after lieutenant, when Sheriff Falk was put in, he took me as his undersheriff, and then through the election became the sheriff a couple years ago. So.
Are you the youngest sheriff in the?
So
Michigan?
There's been some rotating, but I think I am still the youngest serving sheriff. Not the youngest ever. I remember Ed Hake, if you knew Ed or not.
Oh, yeah.
Great guy.
Yep.
Just a riot would stop into the office, and right after I was elected, he stopped in just to ask how old I was, because he was elected at 35. I was elected at 36. So he's like, I still got you beat.
I still got you beat. Yeah.
See, he was excited.
Ed was a good shit.
Oh man, he was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So, being your age, I want to kind of zone in on your age a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I think it's important. I think there's people out there that are going to be watching and listening that are going to be curious about it, especially young people that are looking to come into the to the ranks of the sheriff's department, police departments around Michigan that are going to be listening to this podcast, and you know they're going to look to you. They're definitely looking to you as somebody who's like, wow. I mean, he moved to the ranks quickly.
Yeah.
You know, what was your level? I mean, was there any kind of anxiety? Let's start with like becoming under sheriff. I mean, because there's a lot of sheriff deputies at the department that are much older and been there longer.
Yeah. So that's I think there's always anybody who takes a leadership position. I think there's always going to be that questioning of yourself. You know, can I do this, or how are people going to perceive me? But the biggest step out in those positions are you're coming out of the union, right? So
sure.
So if there is a change in administration, you could go. I've got a young family. When I became undersheriff, we just had Dean, and he was only a couple years old. So you think about the fact that you've dedicated your life to this organization. You want to retire here, but then, you got to be elected. There's always a possibility, that you might not be able to keep your job. So it's a conversation I had with my wife, and we talked about it, and we're on the same page. But I think I've got a quote that hangs on in my office. It says the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have.
Yeah, that's a true quote.
It is, and I think we see a little bit of lack of that sometimes with people nowadays. It just, that you really got to work hard to get where you want to get, and that's what I attribute this to. Watching my parents and how hard they worked, and the example that they set for me to just say, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the absolute best that I can every time that I come in. There's a lot of sacrifice with family and everything else that goes along with this, and it's not just in these leadership positions. It's our deputies too, and our corrections deputies as well. The jail never closes. We always got to have deputies on the street. So the amount of sacrifice that everyone's family who does this job makes is tremendous. So
how many deputies are at the?
So we got 14, including our supervisors and our detectives. So then we got 14 in the jail.
So on the road.
Yeah.
How many? You have 14 on the road.
Yeah. So not necessarily on the. So on the road we have 9 right now. So 2 shifts. That's. There's not a lot of wiggle room there.
No,
so.
There's not. How many square miles is the county?
524.
Yeah. How do you do that? I mean, seriously. I mean, this question is one of the questions that I definitely wanted to ask. How do you do that?
Well, it's tough. So we usually have 2 people on, a shift. Sometimes during the day, there's our animal control deputy be out there, a marine patrol dep will be out. But it can be difficult, and that we're at a point now where we've never seen the type of call volume that we have in this last 2 years. We set another record. We handled 4,007 complaints last year with between 8 and 10 guys and gals, depending on where our staffing levels are at. It is difficult. But you do the best you can to, you get in the car and you try to make an appearance at as many of the villages and as many of the townships in the county as you can. That's not always possible with call volume. Because a lot of times if I got traffic crashes that I'm going to, I don't get to Arcadia, or I might not get to Cleon Township, that day. But we really do try to get ourselves out there as much as we can, make ourselves visible. But it's tough. It's funny. So growing up here, you always used to hear people say, Manistee has the most police per capita of any place in the United States.
I used to say that shit all the time when I was younger, because when we had the state and you guys and the city PD, and then when the tribe came in, it was like, man, you can't do shit in this town.
Yeah. Well, things have definitely changed. The closure of the MSP post, was something that was really unfortunate for us, and I think we miss them every day. Not just their presence, but the camaraderie that used to be with this job, where we used to drink coffee with those guys and handle complaints with them and do that sort of thing. But
so it wasn't like Super Troopers?
No, it's you can watch movies and even it's funny. So you get new people in the car, like for an internship or whatever, and you do some cool stuff, and then you're back in the office for a couple hours typing reports. You're like, man, I thought we were gonna be doing fun stuff all the time. Like, no, there's a paperwork aspect to this job that's really important. But where I was getting at with that is when I got hired down to Oceana County in Hart, they had a post down there, the Hart Post for MSP, the sheriff's office. And then every small municipality has their own PD. So Hart PD, Pentwater, Shelby, New Era, Walkerville, Rothbury. It'd be like having an Onekama Police Department and a Bear Lake Police Department and a Coatmish Police Department. And so until you get into it and start doing this job and look at how it's done in different counties, you don't realize how many more police officers they had down in Oceana County than we ever did up here, even when the post was running. So it's all perspective, right? Yeah,
and I'm an advocate for more police.
Oh, me too.
I mean, like 500 and some square miles of the county.
Yeah.
The city's 2 square miles, and so the Rusty Fish 100.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The first year that we were putting that race together, and we were plotting the bike route, out county, gravel roads, you see some shit like just random people out in the woods. Looks to me like they're cooking, but I don't know.
Right.
It just seems a little sketch.
Yeah.
And it could be, I don't know. I feel like if you wanted to bury a body someplace out in the middle of the county, it'd be really hard for somebody to find them. And it'd be scary for me. I like to think I got a little machismo, I mean, coming from the military or whatever.
You handle yourself a little bit.
But going out by myself in the night, out in the middle of the county someplace, and the closest help could be a couple 100 miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's definitely, something that we take very seriously with our officers and their safety. But that's just kind of the job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, we look out for each other. We have great partners with the tribe and their officers coming to back us up and assist us when we need it. And the same with the city. We had an incident where our deputy was getting choked. Guy reached through the screen. This was years ago. But, I mean, we had the city cars coming out to back us up. It really is. We really do look out for each other. But we try to be safe, too, right? So if you have a high priority call, typically the first guy's gal's not just going to run in there by themselves. They're going to wait for somebody else to get there to back them up. But it is intimidating, and I'm always an advocate for more law enforcement. Yeah. People don't like that sometimes, and they give us a little bit of grief for sitting on the side of the road enforcing speed. But I also field 3 or 4 calls a week to my office saying, hey, Stronach or Pierport or different areas calling because they have people speeding. So there's always going to be both sides to that coin, and people who like what you're doing, and then people who are frustrated by what you're doing. So.
Yeah, I think if they're frustrated, they're probably doing something wrong.
Well, yeah, I
like to see the presence. I really do like to see the presence. I like to see them on the road. I like to see them, you guys in businesses, walking around, shaking hands. The city is the same way. I love seeing the guys walk around town.
Yep.
And they're not. None of you guys are out to get somebody.
No.
You're out to protect and serve. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, I think you're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to your evolution as a sheriff for sure. I feel like that there is a funding issue, and I don't know if you want to touch on that or not. But I would like to see. I'll just come out and say. I mean, I would like to see more funding. To help build, the force, particularly in the county. And I don't know why I'm thinking so much about the county, and that's not like the city, but I spend a lot of time out county.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I do, and I'm like, man, I would sure like to have a little bit more out here.
Well, I'll say this, we enjoy a great deal of support from our county commissioners. And so I certainly don't want it to sound like, that they're not supportive of what we're doing at the sheriff's office and what I'm trying to accomplish through our mission. But I'm always going to be an advocate for adding more. You know,
sure.
MSP just with the relocation, you know, they fluctuate with how often they can have troopers here, and they're great partners, but that's just a product of what they're working with. So, you know, I just don't want this to sound like the commissioners aren't supportive of us, because they certainly are. But that's a conversation that we're going to have. You know, we're coming into budget time with the county, and that's going to be part of my chat is, you know, hey, our call volume is at levels that we've never seen before, and the tribe is assisting us with calls. So that's going to be part of that conversation.
Why do you see this rise? Why do you think there's this rise? What is it coming from?
You know, I get this question all the time. You know,
I'm sure.
why are your complaint numbers so high, and why are things going up? And I really think, and hopefully I don't pull up my soapbox too long here.
Get on it.
I really think it's a product of society.
Okay.
You know, we as a society have become really intolerant of anybody who doesn't think the exact same way that we do, or you know, and I think a lot of that is a product of what social media has done for people. It's given them a platform to basically say whatever they want without repercussion, and I think it's really emboldened people to treat people poorly. And you could probably look at comments even on your own social media and see, you know, the impact of that.
Yeah, sometimes it gets pretty wild. I tend not to read them, to be honest with you.
It's the same way with the sheriff's office page. You know, I think it's really important that we can communicate with the community through that, but we get a lot of grief on there too. So, but it's also a way for me to keep a pulse on the community too, which is nice, because I do see stuff and I'm like, hey, what's going on with that? Nobody's even told us about that. So, you know, always want to appreciate that ability to communicate in that way. But I really think it's just a general intolerance in society. You know, we used to be able to, if you and I disagreed on something, we could sit down and we could talk, and we could agree that we didn't see eye to eye, or that maybe we thought a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, we could move forward. And I really think, you know, from the top down in society, you just don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
And even communication skills, I think, have really kind of gone out the window. You know, you see young people, and you know, they can't. 95% of our job is communication, right? Coming up, being able to talk to somebody, especially people you've never met before, and I think it's a skill set that we're losing, and I think that all has an impact on it. So,
how's it changed since you've come in to policing from your days as part-time? Like, how has policing evolved in that time?
Well, certainly technology has continues to change, and you know, I came up through. So when I started in Hart, we didn't have computers in the car. You ran everything over the radio. No mapping technology that told you where you were going, or you know, how to get there. So I really came up through that technological evolution in law enforcement, and it's all for the good, right? Sure, I mean, it keeps our deputies safe and our officers safe, and it helps us be more efficient in the way we provide service. But you know, it seems to be cyclical, right? Like after 9/11, you saw this huge surge in support for law enforcement.
Yep.
Which was fantastic, and you know, a lot of people wanted to be in law enforcement, and you saw that rise, and that's kind of where I came in at, right? That 2005 area, we're still riding that wave, and then you saw, you know, some of the things dip down where we got a lot of grief, and you know, you see some of the negative videos played on the internet over and over again.
Yeah, man, that's the one thing about the internet too, is it's all clips.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, for the most, I mean, it's very rare that you see the moment where it's going to give the most impact, negatively or positively, but you don't see the whole thing kind of unfold most times.
Yeah, we're at a disadvantage in law enforcement too, because, you know, you can, as a private citizen, can put out whatever you want, right? You can upload your video to YouTube today, and you know, that's fine. But you know, we have to think about case integrity and investigation integrity and things like that. And there are things that we have to do before we can put some of that stuff out there. So, a lot of time the narrative gets written and people talk, you know, formulate their thoughts and their opinions on a situation before they really understand the entirety of what happened there, right? And don't get me wrong, there are things that have happened that are just absolutely, there needs to be accountability, and people need to, you know, to be held accountable for their actions. But, you know, I think oftentimes people forget that we're human beings. You know, you're a business owner, so would you be able to say, I'm trying to turn your podcast around on you here, but would you be able to say that you've done everything perfect since you started?
No.
Would you be able to say that your employees have always been perfect every time they... So there again, that's what we're expecting of our police officers, right? We're expecting them every single time to go out and be 100% perfect. And when you're dealing with human beings, it's just not possible to do that. So now again, something grossly negligent, definitely need to have accountability. I'm 100% for that. Nobody dislikes a bad cop more than we do. But again, we have to remember that we're dealing with human beings and we're not perfect, and we're never going to be perfect.
Yeah,
So.
and hey, sometimes bad people become cops.
Oh, that happens
you know?
too.
And bad people, own businesses and or whatever. So I mean,
but it's weeding them out.
Far out.
And I think what you're seeing in that, to get back to your original question of how things have changed, there is a lot of accountability that has been breathed into the profession to make sure that we are upholding our oath and making sure we fulfill that commitment to the communities that we serve. And I know the great thing about where we're at here in Manistee is the chief, myself, the director for the tribe, the lieutenant for the MSP post. We're all very like-minded. At least locally here with the director and the chief, we're friends and we work together. We don't always see eye to eye, right? That's
Sure.
part of running different organizations, but we're able to have those civil conversations, and even if we don't agree, we can kind of move forward for the betterment. And you don't see that everywhere. I mean, I talk to all of the 83 sheriffs in the state of Michigan, and those relationships aren't always there. So we're very fortunate here to be able to do that.
If we can talk about crime for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When I have discussions with my kids, they're older.
Yeah.
My youngest daughter's 7, but my older two, 17, going to be 18, the other one's going to be 20. When we have conversations at the dinner table, I find myself sounding like my dad sometimes when I say things like, when I was your age, or when I was growing up. And maybe I'm naive to it. You've been in law enforcement a lot of years. You've been connected to those in law enforcement even before you were in. So when I say when I was growing up, we didn't have the drug problems that we have today. And I gotta feel like that's true to a certain extent. I mean, I would say to the kids, hey, what's going on at school? I mean, are there parties going on or what? We have a pretty open relationship with our kids, and I want to know, kind of what's happening, and are you involved in it? And, or whatever. You guys going out in the woods and having bonfires and drinking beer, like your dad used to? Yeah. And the answer is no. Nobody's doing that anymore, Dad. It's mostly, it's like, a lot of marijuana, but also pills, and it escalated. And there was like the other day, I'm dropping my daughter off at school, and she said, yesterday, her mom was dropping her off, and there was an ambulance outside. And the first thing she thought of was maybe a kid OD'd. Dude, I never thought of that in high school.
Never.
Not once.
No. It's again, I think a lot of those changes come with the way society is today. You think of how interconnected everybody is with social media. When we were younger, if there was going to be a party, you had to hash it out at school and figure it out at school.
You're right.
Because nobody wanted to jump on the phone and have mom pick up the other phone in the house, right, and be listening to your conversation. So that was, now with social media and kids, their exposure to drugs was if they saw somebody else who had drugs, back in the day. Now, all you do is flip on Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, and you can get exposure to all that stuff where kids in previous generations just never had the ability to get that exposure unless somebody directly tied to them had it. So I think that makes it a lot easier, for kids to dabble in that kind of stuff because they can communicate very easily. They can get a hold of the stuff a lot easier because it's just easier to communicate, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's a different world, and we do see a lot of the drugs, and we do our absolute best to try to combat that and make sure that this isn't a comfortable environment for people to, sell things like pills and things like that. But it's tough.
What did we have a drug overdose not that long ago? I mean, I feel like it does happen a lot more frequent. I mean, we've got Narcan downtown, which I have no idea how to use, but there's box of it downtown in the event. I mean, I'd be scared shitless if somebody fell in front of me and I didn't know what was happening. But I have been told that even if you do that to somebody, it's not going to kill them if they don't need it. Right.
So we have a vending machine at our office, and you make that stabbing. Most of it's nasal, so the stuff in the boxes downtown are all nasal applications. So stick it in their nose. It's a one-time you mist it into their nose, and that's an effective tool to help them out of that overdose. And I got some grief for that. I got some grief for the Narcan vending machine and the availability, and I understand the frustration, right? Like, why don't we have EpiPen, vending machines or insulin vending machines? We're giving this stuff out, but I think my message is, I've seen through my years of law enforcement how difficult it is to come out of addiction. I've seen it in people that I know, and I know how difficult it is to come out of that, and how many times people typically try before they're successful. And so the more that we can get those life-saving tools out into people's hands, I think the better we are, because it gives them that next chance, right? We overdose, somebody overdoses, and it gives them that next chance to say, hey, I'm going to try it again. We're doing the same thing in the jail, with our MAT program that we're trying to stand up in the jail, where we can get people who are inside of our facility before they're released, medication-assisted treatment, so that when they get out, it's a lot better chance that they're successful in breaking that addiction, because it plays a huge role in recidivism for us, and it trickles down into everything, into property crimes, and people are trying to get money to feed that addiction. So, and again, I tell people, okay, so if somebody doesn't have Narcan at their house to give this life-saving drug to somebody that's there, they're going to call 911, and then we're going to drive 100 miles an hour to get there to give them the same medication that we could have supplied them to have in their house. So again, I understand people's frustration with the prices of other medications and things like that, but it really is a life-saving tool that I'm pretty passionate about having in the hands of anybody that can have it. And if you want to learn, I'd be happy to teach you. It's very easy.
Just like a nasal spray.
Yep, just stick it in your nose, squeeze it, and it sprays it. And again, you never know when somebody might pop in here and you're administering Narcan. We've had it at a lot of different places that you really wouldn't think that would be an issue. But
I've been my sister-in-law is a nurse practitioner, and she works in the ER, and the description of giving somebody Narcan when they're ODing or whatever, in my mind, it's like Pulp Fiction when Uma Thurman gets hit in the chest and she just goes,
That's exactly
it's like you
what
come
it
back
is.
to life, dude.
Yeah. It's an amazing drug to counteract that. And again, I was giving a jail tour to a commissioner and showing him a video from the jail where we administered it, and it's the exact same thing, just like you said. They're gone, and then you administer the drug. It stops that receptor, clogs that receptor, so that the opioids can't be in it anymore, and it's like they come back from the dead. And really cool that we have modern science has given us that kind of tool to help people out of that, because the problem that we're seeing now is fentanyl. So before, heroin and those things, morphine pills that people were using, we could very easily save them. Fentanyl's so powerful that a lot of times several doses of Narcan aren't even enough.
Yeah, I was told that too.
To bring them out. So, and what people don't realize is that the drugs that are coming in are all cut with fentanyl.
All cut with fentanyl.
People think that they're smoking methamphetamine or using methamphetamine, and really it's maybe a small amount of meth with fentanyl mixed in. And so you talk to them, and they're like, "No, I don't use that." Like, yeah, you do. You just don't know how your drugs are being made, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Because people think, "Hey, I've done this, 10 times before, but this dose is different." So it's so important that we're giving people the treatment options and stuff that they need. And I think we're doing really good with that in this community.
Man, that fentanyl shit. Well, I mean, I read something the other day. There's a Adderall shortage, and it's coming from it's like the kids that need it and they're selling it or whatever.
Yeah.
And now there's street Adderall that has fentanyl in it. I mean, how wild is that, dude? With some kid that needs it, and his buddy's on it, and says, "Well, I got some right here." And
it's scary.
Good God, man.
Yeah, and the marketing that they use, we're seeing a lot of those small tablets, or you probably remember back in the day, people used to do Molly or MDMA ecstasy.
Yep.
And they'd come in the tablets and they'd have unicorns and all kinds of cool designs stamped on them, that made them kind of neat for kids.
Appealing.
Appealing. Yeah. So we're seeing the same thing with some of that stuff coming up now in the fentanyl stuff. So just something for parents to be aware of. Keep an eye on what your kids are doing and what they got. We see a huge trend in people that just want to be friends. And so then something bad happens. They say, "Well, I had no idea." Get involved in your kids' lives.
Yeah, I think it's key. Talk to them. You know,
Put the phone down.
don't be a bad parent.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of the problems that we have with the younger generation is, you know, iPads, cell phones. Parents are on doing this all night too, just along with the kids. I could go down. When I was in college, briefly, went to a party, and just around the drug thing, this just popped in my head, and took a 12-pack of PBR. I was with one of the guys from the baseball team, and walked in, and it was my first like party away from home, and I can remember there wasn't a whole lot of beer drinking going on.
Yeah,
a lot of marijuana, Saginaw Valley.
Okay.
And I walked into the restroom, and there was a dude who was basically passed out, but he still had a needle in his arm. And that was my first and only experience with anything other than seeing some marijuana, you know, growing up. And I was like, that right there was enough for me to be like, fuck this. Yeah. I can't do it. But wild to see. Yeah. You know, and more, the older I get, the more and more people I know where they have a loved one who's OD'd or constantly going down this road of.
You know, and that goes back to that. You know, you're seeing all this opioid settlement money that's coming out, and you know, I watched a documentary on it and just how the prescribing was going and how easy it was to get your hands on it, and people just don't realize how quickly addictive it is. So you have a knee surgery, and you take your medications just the way that your doctor prescribed them, and the next thing you know, you're hooked. And it's really, really difficult to break out of it. And then, you know, that kind of devolves from there. Once you can't get your hands on the pills, then you start looking for other avenues to feed that, and it's an awful disease.
Yeah, the pills lead to heroin. Yeah. It leads to fentanyl. It leads to something stronger, because as soon as you can't get your prescription, you're down for whatever. That's wild to me.
Yeah, it's an awful disease.
Segue a little bit. You're doing some active shooter training.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that for a little bit, because I have some questions about that.
Yeah, all right. So so I started teaching CRAES, which stands for Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events, back when I was emergency manager in 2017. We're probably coming up on like 5,000 people that I've put through this training so far. Businesses, houses of worship in the community, all of our schools have gone through it. Taught at a couple conferences, which is pretty cool. But it's through a company called Alert out of Texas State University. And so we're going to be holding a public session at the Vogue Theater, right in the big theater, May 8th at 6 o'clock. Everybody's welcome. It's free. You can come in. I just did it for the Vogue staff prior to scheduling this public session. So it's a great venue for it. Big screen, you know, you're in the theater. But it's something I'm very passionate about. You know, you see the active violence that goes on in the country every single day, and I'm really passionate about giving people the tools that they need to be as successful as possible if they find themselves in a situation like that. And you know, I kind of liken it to I always, at the beginning of my training, I talk about a little bit about that, like a post 9/11 mindset. So prior to 9/11, if you're on an airplane that was hijacked, the recommendation was basically sit in your seat, do what the hijackers tell you to do. You know, post 9/11, you know, what happens today when somebody acts a fool on an airplane? Everybody else stands up too, right? And they pound them in the ground, or they duct tape them to their seat, or whatever they have to do. You know, when we need that same mindset with active violence, and so people aren't just freezing, hiding under desks or tables, you know, taking some ownership of their personal safety, and that's what that class is all about. So.
Yeah, my son was there when you did the Vogue Theater one. And he was impressed. He was shocked a little. He was, you know, I don't want to say he was scared, but I mean, there's a lot that goes into your mind when you start thinking about the possibility of some of that shit happening. Do you do anything like that at MAPS at the schools?
Yep, I've done it for all of our schools in Manistee County. And so basically, you know, everybody sees the news, right? We know what's going on in the country. You know, but one of the things I say a bunch in my training is our body's not going to go somewhere our mind hasn't been before. So if you haven't thought about how you're going to react in that situation, when the feces drops in the oscillating blades, you're not going to go there. You know, and that's where you see people freeze and you know, so if I can get your mind thinking of the three options that we talk about: avoid, deny, or defend, which avoid the threat to your safety, deny access to your location, which is basically a lockdown, or having a serious conversation about defending yourself. If I can get your mindset there prior to bad things happening, there's a lot better chance that we'll go there when the bad things do happen. And, it does, I get that a lot, like, hey, is this kind of like fear, you're trying to get people scared, and that's really not it. I mean, you turn on the nightly news, I'm watching news every single night, and it seems like every day there's a new report out there. So if it happens, there's no do-overs, right? For a community where this happens, you don't get to go back in time and say, hey, next time we're gonna change the way, we're gonna do more training. So that's why I'm so passionate about it.
The first time I heard that I didn't know it was you, but I just heard that there was active shooter training, at the school. My first inclination was, man, those kids got to deal with this now. It's going to be in their brain. But then the more and more I thought about it, like you explained it perfectly, because, you don't get any do-overs. Yeah. And it's a lot like doing a tornado drill or what. It's not a lot like doing that, but it's in the same vein. Hey, we got to be prepared. What if there's a tornado? Back in the day, what if we were going to get nuked? Yeah. We have to get under our desk.
I talk about fire drills too.
Fire drills, same thing.
How do you have any idea how many people we lose to educational fires in this country every year? It's less than 1 on average. So we've gotten so good at fire drills, right? Fire, smoke, we get out, we evacuate. We do 5 of them a year in our schools. But how many people are we losing to violence? Yeah. And we only do 3 lockdown drills. So it's a little maddening for me because we've gotten really good at fire, but we're still doing 5, and we're only doing 3 lockdown drills. So it's not about the fear stuff. It's about, hey, this is the realistic situation that we're dealing with in the country right now. And, we got to give people the tools to be successful if we can. Yeah,
and I think as we age and the generation turns over, a lot of this stuff is going to be easier for people to handle. I mean, but before a lot of this was coming to the mainstream with the active shooter or like COVID, for example, when that was going on, and a lot of the unrest that was happening there, we started to see this push of, people not being allowed into the schools, certain times when kids can come and go. Yep. How it's locked, and you got to get buzzed in, and all of this. It still feels a little sterile to me. Yeah. I from my experience growing up, and yours too, I had a key to almost every gym in this town. I could open up a door at all the schools to play basketball, lift weights or whatever. There was no supervision, and so then I'm the old guy now saying we turned out fine. Yeah. My hope is that there could be some kind of middle ground, because like a lot of times, even the kids, if they're not, if they're just looking for something to do after school, go into the gym or go to the weight room or just maybe even just go see a teacher. Sometimes it feels a little difficult for them. Yeah.
There's definitely a balancing act there, and we have this conversation a lot with houses of worship too. There's churches in Grand Rapids that patrol their service with rifles. I mean,
that's wild, dude.
Does that work in Manistee? Probably not. Right. So it's really what the community sees as that balance, because security is not comfortable or convenient. It's inconvenient. But again, it all comes down to protecting our kids, and there are no do-overs. And so to be able to say, hey, we did everything that we possibly could to protect our children, is something that I'm very passionate about. And so a lot of people might not be aware, but we meet every month. Started the Manistee County School Safety Committee back in 2017 as well. We meet every single month with our school administrators. K&D, Bear Lake, Onekama, MAPS, all get together in a room with law enforcement and our school administrators to see what we can do to improve school safety. So our emergency operations plans for every school in the county came out of that. A lot of shared protocols came out, and it's great to see the commitment from our schools for that, and it's great to see the commitment from our law enforcement leaders, and to be able to put them all in the same room has been hugely beneficial for the safety of our students. So
it's also getting the bad apples squared away too. I mean, like these kids that were breaking into the buildings downtown, they were still going to school. Yeah, so everybody knew who they were. Yeah, it's like and those kids are interacting with the good kids, causing problems.
Well, but the other side of that coin is there's statutory requirements that the schools have to provide an education. So, and that's important too, right? But we could go down a whole road with that. but the school has their requirements too to provide that education, and it's important, because if we don't, kids go through phases, kids have different influences that steer them one direction or the other. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was a saint my entire life.
Roger that.
I made mistakes. I did things that I shouldn't have when I was a young man, and so any one of those could have altered the course of my career and my life, but it didn't. So there's a lot to unpack there, but just having that commitment to safety, I think, is something that is nice to see from our schools. Yeah.
Like, hear about that 6-year-old that shot that teacher?
I did.
Okay, yep. So, I mean, to speak to what you're just saying, that the school administration has a requirement, has a duty to keep these kids in school.
Yeah.
That kid, from what I can tell, was a problem. And crazy at 6. But there was things that were not done correctly, I think, up until that point.
Yeah. I don't know much about that case, so I hate to comment on it if I don't know the ins and outs of it. But again, I think that's why those conversations are so important, right? Just like the active shooter training, if you haven't talked through what a response to something like that looks like, and I'll use Oxford as an example. When you heard some of the reporting that came out about how that evolved that day with him being in the office and some different things, those are conversations that we had with all our school administrators at school safety. Like, hey, if this happens, early law enforcement intervention is so important for us to get there so that we can deal with this and not have it cascade or have it, snowball into something where we have a tragedy. And so every one of those situations offers that opportunity. And again, we just, the shooting in Nashville, we played the videos. We sat down and we talked about how that entry was made and how the response went and what that looked like. And it's the same thing we do with all our law enforcement. If we have a major incident, we get in a room and we talk about how it went down and what we can do to get better.
Yeah.
And we have to learn from those situations. So don't know the specifics on that one, but I do know that we use a lot of those instances to try to make ourselves better when we break them down. So
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it is. What a world.
I mean, you see a lot of it, man. I applaud you and your team for the job that you do. I really do. Yeah. And it's not an easy job, and you've got a lot of years ahead of you.
Yeah.
I mean, is it your goal to stay sheriff until you retire?
Yeah, I want to retire from the Manistee County Sheriff's Office as the sheriff.
Nice.
August 1st, 2034. So I got a little bit of work to do before I'm eligible. But I think that's what's great, and it kind of goes back to where we started this whole thing, talking about my age. And I've gotten some of that. Like, hey, do you have the experience to do what you're doing? Or,
right.
Why would you want to get into this at such a young age? Because there is that risk of losing an election and having to go out and start over somewhere. What I think that does for me is it guarantees my motivation, right?
Roger that.
If I could retire tomorrow, but I know that I have to keep doing what the community is asking me to do and do the best job I can to do that because I want to stay here. And I know that the way I stay here is by making sure that's what's so unique about this position. I'm not appointed. I'm not, brought on by a counselor or anything like that. I'm elected by the people. It's a really special feeling to be elected by the people that you're going to serve. But I also know that there are expectations with that, right? When they call, I answer the phone, or I call back, so that we can talk about their concerns. And it's tough, right? We got a big county out there with a lot of different people pulling in different directions, but I do the best I can and always encourage people, if you have feedback for us or questions, to contact the Sheriff's Office. I'd be happy to chat about those. But I do want to retire here. I love this community. I mean, my wife and I chose to raise our family here. It's funny, growing up, you probably heard the same thing too. I can't wait to get out of Manistee. It's too small. I want to go somewhere bigger. And then you get a couple years out and you start looking at raising a family, and or you go somewhere else that's bigger, and you go, man, you know what?
It's so nice here.
It's so nice there. And it's funny talking to some of the people that have left our organization, and they say, man, it was cool running and gunning down in Grand Rapids or whatever for a couple years, and man, now I kind of wish I was back there.
Yeah.
Because for all the problems that we have, we're a safe community. We got just a ton of great people here. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening, lately in town, and just to be able to be a part of that is something that I'm really honored every single day that I come into work to know that I was put here, and they've trusted me with that responsibility. So I'd love to keep it for the next, a few years here until I can retire.
Hell yeah, I hope so too.
But again, it's on to the people. So
and I love that. It's just like, I know that we kind of grew up together, but to live in this town and to be able to say, like, I know the sheriff, I know the chief, and that's just not me. That's a lot of the community can say that. And with a phone call or two, we can get in touch and we can talk about things. You're very accessible, which I think is awesome. And I know for sure it's not like that in bigger cities.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a hold of the sheriff, because you got some, if you're down in Wayne County, there's a lot going on down there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Busy.
They're busy.
The sheriff's got a lot more on his plate.
Yeah.
We all have a lot on our plates, but it's just the dynamic of the size of the community. So.
Do you miss being on the road?
You know what? Sometimes I still do it. I was just the other day, I put my uniform on and went out and stopped some cars and got out in the community. And I've always been a cop's cop. I like doing the work, and I like talking to people. And so the other day I got in the car and went out and stopped some cars, and I give my staff a little ribbing, like, hey man, I'm at I got
some tickets.
I didn't write any. Well, I wrote one ticket, but that's a whole. But it's fun for me. They always say this job is having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, and that you get to be part of a lot of interesting things. There are parts of it that are really difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure there's parts of it that are horrible.
Stick with you for the rest of your life and have an impact on who you are as a person for the rest of your life. And that's why I give our staff both, the road obviously is the one that everybody sees, but in the jail as well. People have no idea what goes on behind those doors of the jail and how difficult that job really is to be back there.
Last night, I don't know how it came up. I was at a dinner party for my wife, her like an end of the tax season party, and the corrections officer topic came up. Basically, it's just like being a police officer, in that you're asking a 21, 22-year-old kid to be a corrections officer or a sheriff or a city PD someplace. The pressure and the anxiety that's you're going to grow up quick.
Yeah.
And your mind's going to change quick. And I said, it's just like being in the military. I mean, you're when you're 19, 20, 21 years old and you happen to be in one of the areas that are going to see some stuff, you change. And it's I remember when I came back from the Air Force and I was a Marine officer, and there was a car. This is going to sound a little callous. There was a car accident. There was a deceased woman, front seat, and it was like my first week. And Kenny Hilliard, I was working with him, and he pushed me to do all the things, thinking that it was going to be an issue for me, and it wasn't. Because it kind of been there. But I could see that if it was some young kid that was going to be a Marine officer, to get your first look at, something that horrific. Yeah. And then over and over and over again.
I think the statistic is, they say that the average person in their lifetime experiences 2 to 3 traumatic incidents, that have that sort of impact on them. And, a career law enforcement officer sees upwards of 200 of those in their lifetime during their career. So, that's one thing that, we've made more accessible and we understand is how important the mental health of our deputies and our officers are, because we do see that. I have stuff that, there's one particular point in my career I handled a fatal traffic crash and had some interaction with the family, and that is something that still to this day bothers me. I can and has an impact on me as a person. So those things stick with you, and it's funny because you can go a whole career and then just that one thing that can turn it for you. So having the employee assistance program that we do and having those resources available to our staff. Because we can't do good for the community unless we're good ourselves, right? Yeah. And if you're struggling, that's going to impact the service that you provide. So,
I think that's great, because I think back in the day it was, hey man, suck it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get back to work.
Yep.
And So it's the after the tragic event too that it's just, I mean, having to talk to the family or be the bearer of that bad news.
Yeah.
And you've got to be strong.
Yeah.
You know, that's.
I think death notifications are by far the worst thing that we do. You know, it's so important for the family, but it really is the most difficult and impactful part of this job for most people.
Yeah.
Because telling somebody that their loved one's never coming home again is horrific, and just something that I don't think you ever get used to or you ever get comfortable with. So.
No, I mean, I was part of a death notification once, and that, you know, that's going to stick with me the rest of my life.
It changes you.
It's anyhow, we're going to end that on a solid note. Thank you so much for doing this.
I appreciate it.
Super proud of you. I'm
Thanks.
so glad that you're the sheriff of this community. I think you're doing some awesome things. I want you to retire here.
Well, I do too. I appreciate that, and it's love what you're doing here too. It's great to get the community out there, right? So we got so much great stuff going on here, and to have your platform highlighting a lot of that positive stuff, and you know, making me laugh every morning when I check out whatever you're posting in the morning. It's really cool, man. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome.
So.